So, welcome to Gaule's Question Time. I've got the pleasure today of being joined by Brett Cotten from Arda Biomaterials. Hi, Brett.
Hey Andrew, how you doing?
Very good. Very good to be chatting with you, mate. I think I've known you about 3 years and that now, or a bit more. That it feels like longer, to be honest.
It does, yeah. And we started the company 3 years ago, so we've known each other since the founding of Arda.
Yeah, that's right. So great. Would you give us a brief introduction to yourself and Arda, then we'll get into the real meat of it.
Yeah, sounds good. So, like you said, my name's Brett Cotten. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a chemistry technology company called Arda Biomaterials. And at Arda, we transform waste streams into new polymers and new materials that don't have any plastic or animal-derived ingredients. And the reason why we think this is a big problem to solve is that animals through factory farming, it's pretty abhorrent. Affects our health, it affects the environment. And then in terms of plastics in the 20th century, I mean, we've seen the rise of all sorts of plastics in the environment, and then more recently in the news, all of the health effects it's having as well. And so for us, we want to return to a time where we don't have to rely on petrochemical inputs, but also don't continue to contribute to abhorrent factory farming practices.
Okay, great. So that's a driving purpose and that for you in that then. But what's your background?
So I grew up in the US in a small town outside of New York City called Sparta, New Jersey. And I really loved science fiction. And I went to Penn State University to study biochemistry, but also was involved within an entrepreneurship program there. And after I graduated, I met this professor from Georgetown who said that he was using his entrepreneurship students as guinea pigs to write books, do podcasts, and run conference series, and that they were able to get a hold of some amazing people to interview. Someone even got a hold of Barack Obama, and I ended up writing a book about biotech entrepreneurship in the food and materials space. Ended up doing a master's degree at Cambridge, full of doctors and scientists who want to be on the more commercial side, and subsequently worked at some startups and investment firms within the field of alternative proteins. So very much interested in replacing animals in industry, but was on the food side before. It was only after meeting my co-founder TJ at a startup accelerator called Entrepreneur First here in London that we realized that food is just a material that we eat. There's all sorts of other materials that we wear, that we sit on, that we could look at being involved in as well.
Fantastic. So could you take us through the process a bit about what Arda Biomaterials does in turning beer waste into leather is my basic understanding, but how do you do that?
So we met at this accelerator, and at the time it was based in a part of London called Bermondsey. So it's just south of London Bridge and Tower Bridge. And it was a beautiful summer day. And this area is known for having a lot of craft breweries. So we met a guy who said, "Guys, you live next to all the breweries. See what you can go do with their waste streams." And we went out to the brewers, and out in front, we saw stacks and stacks of spent barley grains. And usually these in cities are a big waste buildup problem for brewers. They have to pay to get it outside of the city. Even the big ones in more rural areas, they're using it as really low value use cases. We're talking like cheap animal feed that's low grade. A lot of the times can't even be consumed. Biogas, sometimes it's even landfilled. And we realized that there's actually a rich protein content that's left over in this feedstock. If you think about brewing or making whiskey, the first step is to take in wheat and barley, pull out the sugar, and then add in your hops and yeast and start fermenting it. But the piece that's left behind, it kind of looks like wood chip. And these husks are composed of about 25% plant protein, and the rest is more fibrous material like cellulose and lignin. And what we're able to do is in the same kind of vessels that brewers and whiskey distillers extract sugar, we can extract this leftover protein. And there's been about a decade of research now, especially in places like Cambridge in the UK, to use these plant proteins to replace plastic films, things like food packaging. But we've also been able to use plant proteins to mimic the structure of animal-based ones. A good example is collagen found in skin, which is also the basis of leather. Hence why we're first beginning with leather-like materials. And this feedstock from breweries and whiskey distilleries is excellent. It's rich in proteins, found around the world, and we can make really vast amounts of our materials from just a few brewing sites.
Yeah. No, I've been to your labs and I've seen you with demos and that as well. And the leather product is fantastic looking quality. And I think, in fact, I even introduced you and TJ to a fashion design business that I'm an investor in that in because I thought the quality was so good that it can be turned into quality fashion sort of items and that as well. So it shows the quality and the of what you're producing. So
It's funny because I think I knew nothing about leather before starting the company with TJ, but the deeper we looked into it, the history is really interesting. So before plastics, before lots of chemical use, leather used to be tanned with things like oak bark, where they'd work in these tannins to go from a rotting skin into what we know as leather. And then this process took months, and some clever chemists in the mid 1900s realized that we can use toxic chemicals like chromium, which is really polluting to waterways, and this would just cut down the processing time drastically to days. And on top of using these chemicals, what if we added a nice plastic top coat? And this is what leather has become today. And so many people don't realize that it's not this natural material anymore. It's been skewed. And so we're hoping now to return to a time in the 1920s and 30s when Henry Ford was looking at soy protein for car interiors,
wow.
but with a modern understanding of chemistry and biology and material science so that we can really take it forward for performance, for scale and price in a way that wasn't possible, almost 100 years ago.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So we're talking through the five P's that are in my book. You've covered
Mhm.
well already the purpose and the vision that you've got. We've covered your process. The central P is people. So tell me a bit more about how you and TJ became the founders and who you've got within your team now, because people are so important in driving these ventures forward.
They are, and I think oftentimes it's not as high of a priority as it should be. We're quite lucky that we're coming up to a team size of 10 at the moment, and everyone who's joined is still with us. So we take a lot of pride and are also very grateful to have maybe a little bit of luck on our side, that we've gotten some great people to work with us, both in and outside of the team, including yourself. But we started the company in this accelerator called Entrepreneur First, and they bring in 80 people in the cohort that we were in, investment bankers, software developers, a few PhDs, and it's kind of like Love Island or The Bachelor. So there's makeups, there's breakups, and when you break up with someone, there's even a separate channel in Slack where you say nice things about each other to try to get someone else to couple up with this other person. Uh, and at the very beginning, there were these 80 people, but there was only one guy who had a PhD and wanted to work in the climate sector. And knew some other people had their eye on him, so I had to act quick. And luckily, it worked out. So TJ is an Oxford trained chemist. He also was at Durham for his undergrad in nanotechnology, nanomaterials. And he loves leather. He always has a leather satchel around him, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
we both were living in Bermondsey, so he's incredibly well rounded. He's not just a brilliant scientist, but he's very much he can present very well. He's quite social. He's really in tune with hiring great cultural
Yeah, yeah,
fits.
yeah.
And we started the company in 2022, and we started out in his kitchen. The two of us. We eventually raised our first round of funding, and this was when we were able to bring on our first three hires. So the first three were an R&D manager, uh, a designer who was designing for some really big brands over 10 years of her career at that time, and a biomaterials scientist. And so together we began formulating experiments, and particularly the designer, Jess, it was amazing at really transferring science into the kinds of things that you would expect uh, for designers to care about, aesthetic, hand feel, some of the things that are quite difficult to translate into a quantitative piece so that
Yeah, yeah.
scientists can develop it further. So we're a team of five for a while, and then we were lucky enough to get a grant from the UK government, where he then brought on someone, well, two people, both trained in the same lab in Cambridge. One of whom used to work at NOPLA, which was developing plastic-free films and coatings. The other, after graduating from Cambridge, became a brewer out in the west of the UK for a year. And then now he's back with us doing both chemistry and bringing a lot of his brewing knowledge to the table. Uh, so we have a really great team. We
Oh,
have an engineer who's joined with our first commercial hire coming in soon, and we're looking forward to building out a more
yeah,
commercial
yeah.
team as opposed to just the R&D engine.
Wow, it's a fantastic story, a fantastic thing of how you and TJ and the team and that sort of come together. It sort of feels like some of it serendipity, some of it being, being very determined and making your own luck, and stuff like that, isn't it? But it's fantastic how you got that team together.
It has felt quite serendipitous as well. So little things we laugh about. TJ's PhD supervisor, his last name is Beer,
Right.
or we're currently we've just moved out. I'm calling from our old lab, but it's based in a office complex called the Leather Market.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I couldn't believe that when I first visited you and that there. I thought, what the hell are you two guys doing now? How did you manage to get all of those things and that together? And
little moments that make you feel like you're on the right path. But
yeah,
in terms of people, we're very proud that everyone's still with us. We've
yeah,
had the help of many consultants, interns, advisors, and we feel really grateful
yeah.
for all of the community that is supporting
Yeah,
us.
no, that's great. So that's right. You said people as the central sort of P. My next P is partners.
Mhm.
So your suppliers and I suppose your investors and that as well. Tell us a bit more about the partners that are around you and that and working with you and supporting and investing in you now.
Yeah, in terms of investors, we've just closed our seed round. Before this, we had closed a pre-seed, and our pre-seed was through the accelerator. So we came out of Entrepreneur First, which now have offices in London, in Paris, India, and in San Francisco. And they've been quite supportive. And we're still very close to the team there. And we mentor some of the companies coming out of the program still. Then we did a pre-seed round in 2023, which was a 1.1 million pound raise. And that was led by a fund called Clean Growth Fund here in London.
Yeah, know them well, and they've been previous interviewers on my podcast and that as well. So yeah, good group there.
Yeah, we're incredibly lucky to work with them. They're very experienced and they are really in your corner. So um, we're very happy to work with them. We also, at the same time, brought on a small climate fund called Satdana, who really punch above their weight. Um, we brought on Plug and Play, who are connected to a lot of corporate partners, CPT Capital, who invest into alternative proteins, Serpentine in Switzerland. So we're very much about building an investor community as opposed to the other realm of thinking, which is take as few investors on the cap table as possible.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a little bit more work for quarterly and yearly reporting, but we're very much of this community mindset. Uh, and then in terms of other kinds of partners, for us working in the fashion space, footwear, automotive accessories, things like this, uh, it's really important to have partners that help give you feedback along the way and sort of R&D feedback loops. So that comes from the world's largest luxury brands. It comes from designers who are uh, like not necessarily with a large brand, but more at a local level. Uh, so we don't discriminate. I think it takes a village, and you may get someone from one of the top luxury brands on a phone call with an investor, but equally as important is having someone who works with leather day in and day out up in North London
Yeah.
also on a call with them, giving them feedback about your material.
Yeah. No, fantastic. So the final P, which always then comes back to comes back to the start really is performance.
Mm.
So, what sort of performance metrics are you now being driven by to
Mm.
give your sustainability, get revenue, give returns to your investors? What sort of performance metrics are you guys focused on?
Yeah, I think there's a few to consider. Um, One and two are in terms of price and scalability or path to price and scalability. Others come in the form of mechanical and aesthetic performance. And then there's also pieces like supply chain and sustainability metrics. So talking about one and two with price and scale, um, we have very little that's new about our process in terms of equipment. We use big metal vessels to extract proteins and mix them with different ingredients. And we use equipment that's found in the plastics industry, except without any plastic, to turn them into our sheets. Um, and that working with breweries as well, who use a lot of this equipment already, helps us to achieve really high scales
Hmm.
in time with really low unit economics that are quite favorable, no matter if you're in the luxury sector all the way down to commodity applications where we see our big value add. That's where we get the biggest impact. Uh, in terms of mechanical performance, we're in the low to mid range of animal leather at the moment. So this is most suitable for products like small leather goods. So you can think wallets, bags. Um, we'll be moving more towards more complex performance like footwear. And then the highest of all is automotive because the durability, 10 plus years, water, heat, cold, it
Right, yeah.
is the most difficult to like automotive is the largest category to or the toughest category to go into, and part of the struggle with R&D is you start to get really great tensile strength, tear strength, elongation, and all these specialized leather tests as well. But when you start changing the formulation, you get better water resistance, but then you might start to tweak it in a way that is disadvantageous for another character. So you're constantly adding on new parameters, but the complexity of keeping all in balance changes. Uh, and then it's pieces like sustainability metrics. So for us, we can recycle water. We can turn around our material in under a day from brewery waste stream to leather-like material. It's very quick. It's about 97% less CO2 than animal leather, about 82% less than plastic. These are sort of always being updated because you're changing out ingredients, you're changing out processes. So we're undergoing preliminary LCA with some university partners, but this will change as we scale. And then it's things like local supply chains. Um, Oftentimes, one of the challenges, especially with the tariffs in the US, is when you get a feedstock, it might not be available everywhere in the world, or you might use ingredients that are tough to source, or might only come from the global south, like rubber on monoculture plantations that are at risk of climate change and disease. But the great thing about working with breweries, they can pretty much find a brewery anywhere,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
which means that you could make for North American brands, you could make for Japan, France, Portugal, Germany, around existing factories that produce for automotive or shoes or bags. So that's one of our big strengths. It's not just the technology, but it's the supply chain innovation in addition that mean that we can hit the right price, scale,
Yeah,
performance, sustainability.
yeah.
Yeah, that's our superpower, we think.
Yeah, no, actually, that's an excellent point of that, isn't it? Because you're not shipping petroleum products from certain parts of the world to others. You're shipping locally produced, you know, things that make beer because you're shipping mostly water is close to the population and sort of stuff like that. So it's a very very valid point in that there.
Yeah.
Fantastic,
It
fantastic.
offers all sorts of cool opportunities in the future as well. So one of our dreams is to have a Guinness leather jacket, essentially. Because if you use a stout grain like Guinness, you get a nice black color, kind of the golden harp on the back. Meanwhile, someone could have a nice Stella Artois bag, or you can do local craft breweries. You can really tie it to the feedstock from a specific brewer or
Yeah,
luxury whiskey distiller, or it could just be its own thing that's not tied to a specific brand at all. It just has a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
options.
No, fantastic, fantastic. Brett, that's been fantastic, my friend. Good catching up with you. Great to go through your purpose and the process of turning waste from beer into luxury leather and very durable products and that as well. And great to hear about the partners you've been on the journey and that with, and fantastic the team you brought together. So thanks very much for sharing all of that.
Thank you, Andrew. And we'll have you around for a beer sometime soon.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to one of your one of your events, and particularly in your new offices and labs there, still on the South Bank.
Yep. Well, thank you, Andrew.
Take care, Brett. Please subscribe to future podcasts on Gaule's Question Time.